Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. 5 years ago, I bought my dream property, a modest house sitting on just over 6 acres at the edge of what used to be farmland but has since been developed into one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods. What sold me on the place wasn't the house itself, which needed work, but the old barn that stood about 100 yards behind it. That barn was something special. Built in the 1920s with hand-hewn beams and weathered red boards that had seen nearly a century of seasons, it reminded me of my grandpa's barn where I'd spent countless summer afternoons as a kid. The real estate agent told me the barn predated all the surrounding development by decades and was specifically excluded from the nearby HOA jurisdiction. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just happy to have my little slice of rural paradise within commuting distance of my job. Over the next few years, I poured my weekends and a good chunk of my savings into restoring that barn. I replaced rotting boards, reinforced the foundation, and even got the old hayloft functional again. Inside, I created a workshop where I could restore the vintage tractors I collected and store my tools. The upper level became a sort of museum of rural artifacts I'd gathered over the years, my grandpa's old milk cans, hand tools that don't see much use in the modern world, and family photos showing 5 generations of farmers on both sides of my family. The barn became my sanctuary. After a long day at the office, I'd head out there with a cold drink and tinker with whatever project I had going. The neighbors from the development occasionally walked by and waved, sometimes stopping to admire the building or ask about the history. It was a peaceful coexistence, until the letter arrived. It was a Tuesday evening when I checked my mail and found a certified letter from the neighborhood HOA, figuring it was some kind of community announcement that had been sent to all nearby residents by mistake. I opened it while walking back to the house. I stopped dead in my tracks when I read the first paragraph. It has come to our attention that the structure on your property, specifically the barn located at the rear of your lot, is in violation of multiple HOA covenants, including but not limited to, approved color schemes, Section 4.3, maximum height restrictions, Section 7.2, and maintenance of unsightly structures, Section 12.1. As such, you are hereby fined $7,500, payable within 30 days. Failure to pay this fine and bring the structure into compliance will result in a lien being placed on your property, which may lead to foreclosure proceedings. I read it 3 times, convinced it had to be some kind of joke or scam. My property wasn't even part of their HOA. The barn had been specifically excluded from their jurisdiction when the development was built, something about historical significance and existing structures being grandfathered in. The next morning, I called the number listed on the letterhead. "Good morning, Homeowners Association. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end was chipper and professional. "Hi, I received a letter about my barn supposedly violating HOA rules, but there's been a mistake. My property isn't part of your HOA. Oh, let me pull up your information. Your address." I gave her my address, and I could hear keyboard clicking in the background. "Ah, yes, I see the issue here. You're speaking about the red barn structure, correct?" "Yes, that's right. Let me transfer you to our board president. He's been handling this matter personally." After a few moments of hold music, a deep voice came on the line. "This is the HOA president. I understand you're calling about the violation notice?" "Yes, but there's been a mistake. My property, including the barn, isn't part of your HOA. It never has been." He chuckled, the sound condescending even through the phone. "I've heard that one before. Look, the barn falls within our development's master plan. Previous boards may have been too lenient in enforcing the rules, but that structure has always been under our jurisdiction. That's not what my property deed says, and it's not what I was told when I purchased the place." "Well, your information is incorrect. The fine stands, and you need to either pay it and bring that eyesore up to code, or we'll proceed with a lien. Those are your options." "I'd like to discuss this at your next board meeting," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Fine. First Tuesday of next month, 7 p.m. at the community center. But it won't change anything." He hung up before I could respond. I immediately called my real estate agent, who seemed surprised by the situation. She promised to dig up my closing paperwork and get back to me. Next, I called the county recorder's office to request copies of my property records and any information about HOA boundaries. The month between that call and the HOA meeting was a blur of research and growing indignation. My real estate agent found the original disclosure documents, which clearly stated, "The barn structure and surrounding 2.8 acres are excluded from HOA jurisdiction per agreement dated March 15th with the original developer." The county records confirmed this, showing a clear boundary line that excluded my barn and a significant portion of my property from the development. Armed with this information, I attended the HOA meeting. The community center was packed with residents, most of whom I'd never met. I spotted a few familiar faces, neighbors who had stopped to chat during walks past my property. When my item came up on the agenda, the president, A slick-looking man in an expensive suit summarized the situation for the room. "We have a non-compliant structure, the old barn at the edge of the development, that violates multiple HOA covenants. The owner has been fined and is here to appeal. Though I should note we rarely overturn these decisions." He gestured for me to speak. I stood and addressed the room, my folder of documents clutched in slightly sweaty hands. "Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here because there's been a misunderstanding. My property, including the historic barn, is not part of this HOA and never has been. I have the documents right here showing the exclusion of my barn from your jurisdiction." I held up the papers, but the president waved dismissively. "Those documents are outdated. Our legal team has reviewed the situation and determined that the barn falls under our purview." A woman in the front row spoke up. "That old thing is an eyesore anyway. My house faces it, and it brings down my property value." Another board member nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And imagine what we could do with that space. The association has been looking at options for a community center expansion. Maybe a pool." That caught my attention. "You want my land for a pool?" The president gave his colleague a sharp look before addressing me again. "That's irrelevant. The issue is compliance with HOA standards." An older man in the back raised his hand. "I've lived here since the development was built. That barn was specifically left out of our jurisdiction because of its historical value. I remember the discussions with the developer." "Things change," the president replied curtly. "Our current legal interpretation is what matters." "This is ridiculous," I said, my frustration mounting. "You can't just decide my property is yours." The president leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Either pay the fine and bring the structure up to code, or we'll take the property. Your choice." As the meeting continued, I noticed several residents shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Afterward, as people filed out, a woman touched my arm gently. "They did something similar to my cousin," she whispered. "He had the corner lot with the extra garden space. They claimed it violated green space rules, fined him, then took the land for a community garden when he fought back. They've been picking off properties on the edges for years." Over the next few weeks, I watched with growing alarm as the situation escalated. First came notices taped to my mailbox about community concerns. Then, inspectors from the HOA started appearing at my property line, taking photos of the barn. One afternoon, I found a tow truck attempting to remove my vintage tractor that I'd parked near the barn, claiming it was an abandoned vehicle on community property. The final straw came when I received notice that the HOA had placed a lien on my property for the unpaid fine, now increased to $10,000 with administrative fees. That evening, I called a real estate attorney recommended by a colleague. She agreed to meet me the following day. The attorney's office was small but professional, with degrees and certifications covering one wall. She listened intently as I explained the situation, occasionally making notes. "This is more common than you might think," she said when I finished. "HOAs can become very aggressive about expanding their territory, especially when there's money or development opportunities involved. So, what can I do? They've already put a lien on my property. Based on what you've told me in these documents, they have no legal right to do that. The barn is clearly excluded from their jurisdiction. This lien is improper and potentially fraudulent." She leaned back in her chair, thinking, "Let me do some investigating. I want to look into this HOA practices and this president in particular. Something doesn't add up." Over the next 2 weeks, my attorney and I uncovered a pattern that left me stunned. The HOA had been gradually encroaching on properties at the edges of the development for years. At least 7 other homeowners had been intimidated into either joining the HOA or selling their property after similar campaigns of harassment. More disturbing was what we found about the president himself. He owned a small real estate development company that had been buying up properties around the community at below market rates, often after the HOA had made life difficult for the owners. His company had submitted preliminary plans to the county for a community recreation complex that included the exact location of my barn. There was more. 2 other board members had financial interests in local businesses that would benefit from the proposed development. None of these conflicts had been disclosed to the HOA members as required by state law. One night, as I was sorting through old boxes in the barn's loft, I came across a photo album I hadn't opened in years. Inside were pictures of my grandparents on their farm, standing proudly in front of a barn almost identical to mine. In one photo, my grandpa was showing 4-year-old me how to feed a calf. The sight of it brought tears to my eyes. For a moment, I considered giving up the fight. I could sell the property, take the money, and find somewhere else to live, somewhere without neighbors or HOAs or legal battles. But looking at those photos, I knew I couldn't. This wasn't just about property rights anymore. It was about honoring the past and standing up to bullies. The next day, I met with my attorney to finalize our strategy. "We've got them," she said, spreading documents across her desk. "The original development plans clearly show the exclusion of your property. The previous owner has provided a sworn statement confirming the arrangement. And the conflicts of interest we've uncovered violate both HOA bylaws and state law. "So, what's our next move?" I asked. "A three-pronged approach. First, a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA board outlining their violations and demanding removal of the lien. Second, a complaint to the county recorder's office about the improper lien. Third, and this is where we turn the tables, a detailed letter to every homeowner in the development explaining what their board has been doing." I nodded, a sense of determination replacing the anxiety I'd felt for weeks. "Let's do it." The response was swift and beyond what either of us had anticipated. Within days of our letters going out, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from outraged homeowners. Many had their own stories of HOA overreach but had been too intimidated to speak up. The county recorder's office immediately flagged the lien as improper and opened an investigation into the HOA practices. The president tried damage control, sending a community-wide email claiming I was spreading misinformation and that the board was merely enforcing existing rules. But the evidence was too compelling to dismiss. When a local news outlet picked up the story of a rogue HOA attempting to seize historical property through dubious legal tactics, things really exploded. Suddenly, county officials were taking a keen interest in the HOA operations and the president's business dealings. The special HOA meeting called to address the situation was held in the high school gymnasium to accommodate the crowd. Nearly every homeowner in the development attended, along with several county officials and even a state representative who lived nearby. I arrived early with my attorney and a box of documents, copies of everything we'd uncovered, neatly organized and ready to distribute. The board members filed in looking decidedly uncomfortable, the president attempting to maintain his usual confident demeanor but visibly sweating. As the meeting began, he tried to take control. "We're here tonight to address some concerns that have been raised about HOA operations. I want to assure everyone that the board has always acted in the best interest of the community." A chorus of boos interrupted him. Someone shouted, "Let the barn owner speak." My attorney nudged me forward. With all eyes on me, I took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I've been a good neighbor since moving here 5 years ago. All I want is to be left alone to enjoy my property. Property that has never been part of this HOA." I held up the original development map. "This is the approved plan filed with the county in 2002. It clearly shows the barn and surrounding acreage as excluded from the development." Next came the sworn statement from the previous owner. This confirms that the exclusion was intentional and acknowledged by all parties. Finally, I showed the preliminary plans filed by the president's company. "And this shows why there's been such interest in my property. A development that would personally benefit several board members, including your president." The gymnasium erupted in angry shouts. The president tried to speak but was drowned out. One of the other board members, looking pale, whispered something to him urgently. Finally, a county official stood and called for order. "Based on the documents I've reviewed tonight and the ongoing investigation, I can confirm that the lien placed on this property appears to be improper. Additionally, there are serious questions about conflicts of interest that need to be addressed." What followed was a remarkable display of a community finding its voice. One after another, homeowners stood to share their own experiences with the board's intimidation and overreach. Many expressed outrage at the financial conflicts that had been hidden from them. By the end of the night, a resolution had been passed by an overwhelming majority of homeowners demanding 1. Immediate removal of the lien on my property. 2. A public acknowledgement that my barn was not under HOA jurisdiction. 3. Reimbursement of my legal fees. 4. Refunds to other homeowners who had been improperly fined. 5. The resignation of the president and 2 other board members. 6. A complete audit of HOA finances. The president, seeing the writing on the wall, attempted one last defense. "These accusations are baseless. The board has documentation showing." I interrupted him, something I'd never have done before this ordeal. "Show us. Right now. Show us the documentation you claim gives you authority over my property." He fumbled for words but produced nothing. The room fell silent. "I didn't think so," I said quietly. 2 weeks later, the changes were official. The lien was removed from my property with a formal apology from the new interim HOA board. A check for my legal expenses, $16,340, arrived by certified mail. The county investigation resulted in the former president and board members facing potential civil penalties for their undisclosed conflicts of interest. Most satisfying was the new boundary marker installed at the edge of my property, a small but official sign reading "End of HOA jurisdiction paid for by the association." With the battle behind me, I turned my attention back to my barn. The publicity had brought unexpected attention from the County Historical Society, who determined the structure was indeed historically significant as one of the last original farm buildings in the area. With their help, I applied for and received a historical designation that would protect the barn from future threats. That fall, I decided to host an open house, inviting neighbors from the development and the surrounding area to see the restored barn. Dozens came, many apologizing for not speaking up sooner about the HOA tactics. No need for apologies, I told them. Standing up to bullies is scary. I almost gave in myself. The event became an impromptu community gathering, with people bringing food and drinks. Children played in the open field beside the barn while adults admired the vintage tractors and old farm implements I'd collected. One elderly neighbor, leaning on his cane as he examined my grandfather's old milk cans, smiled wistfully. "This place is important," he said. "It reminds us of what was here before all the houses." History matters. As people left that evening, many suggested making the barn gathering an annual event. The new HOA board president, a retired teacher who'd lived in the development since it was built, even proposed a cooperative arrangement where the HOA would help maintain the access road to the barn in exchange for using the space for certain community events. "No strings attached," she assured me. "And everything in writing, reviewed by your attorney." The former president? Last I heard, his development company was under investigation by the state attorney general's office for various improprieties. I occasionally see him driving past my property, scowling at the now beautiful barn that represents his downfall. I just wave. The barn looks better than ever these days. With the Historical Society's guidance, I've restored it to its original glory while adding modern utilities that don't detract from its character. The hayloft has become a small museum of local agricultural history, with contributions from several old farming families in the area. Sometimes in the evenings, I sit on the new bench I installed facing the barn and think about how close I came to losing this place. I think about my grandfather and how proud he would be that I fought for something that mattered. And I think about the unlikely community that formed because people finally stood up together against those who abused their power. The other day, a young family stopped by while I was working in the yard. Their little boy stared wide-eyed at the big red barn. "Is that where you keep the animals?" he asked excitedly. His mother started to apologize for the interruption, but I waved it off. "No animals right now," I told him, "but would you like to see some real old-time tractors?" His face lit up, and as I led them toward the barn, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This place wasn't just mine anymore. It had become something more. A landmark. A gathering place. A reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And that, more than anything, is what makes it home. The next one is entitled People Story. I'm not going crazy, but there's a vibrating in my room that I hear from time to time and it's making me paranoid. I live alone. No one else lives with me but my dog. The buzz I hear sporadically sounds exactly like my iPhone. Just a quick short vibration about half a second. It's not my iPhone as I hear it when I'm actively using my phone, and it's not my phone. It's not regular. It doesn't happen in intervals. It's completely random. Sometimes I hear it often, sometimes days go by. It's too quiet to hear when I'm watching TV, almost always when there's no other sound. Sometimes it sounds like it's coming from under my bed, sometimes it sounds like it's coming from the ceiling. I can't for the life of me figure out what it is. I live pretty basic. I have a light mounted on the ceiling, CO detector, iPhone charger, in my room, and that's all the electric things in my room. Could it be coming from inside the drywall? Plumbing maybe. I'm not crazy, this is a real sound, but it happens so infrequently I can't pinpoint it at all. Update posted about a strange buzzing in my house over a year ago, and I never was able to figure out what it was. I hear it so infrequently and irregularly that it was almost impossible to figure out what it was. Every time I'd hear it, I'd immediately stop what I was doing and go real silent, waiting with bated breath, hoping it would buzz again. Almost like a cruel joke, it would only buzz after I gave up waiting and went back to whatever it was I was doing. Even up to last week I'd still hear it, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes weeks would go by without hearing it. I'm pretty sure I figured it out, and it's comically stupid what it was. So I was sleeping in the middle of the night like 3 a.m. and I woke up and was in a semi-sleep daze, kinda drifting. The world was real quiet and it was a deep silence. And I heard the buzz, but for the first time it almost immediately repeated. And kept repeating in frequency, almost like a rhythm. I was 100% sure it was my phone ringing on vibrate, so I start groping around the bed to find my phone because the buzzing sounded exactly like my phone buzzing every 2 seconds for about half a second. Once I found my phone, the buzzing continued, but I couldn't quite place where it was coming from. This is gonna sound crazy and I'm amazed this is the source, but eventually my alertness and physical movements woke my dog up, and the buzzing immediately ceased with a grunt. The buzzing was my stupid shepherd's exhales. Like his every exhale, or possible inhale, I'm not sure, was buzzing exactly emulating a cell phone buzz. I'm decently confident that this is the same buzzing that I've been hearing for years, and also the reason that I've been unable to source it, because every time I hear it I get super alert and tense, which immediately wakes up my dog as he's super in tune to my behavior, and his breath buzzing stops. Then when I relax and give up the search, he goes back to sleep as the situation's over. That's when I hear it again, and he again wakes up to see what's got me agitated. I also only ever hear it during moments of calm when I'm lounging. never when I'm active and moving about the house, so this would make sense that it's only ever when my boy's sleeping. I'm pretty satisfied with this answer, and as I haven't heard it since that night, when I do hear it again I'll be on the lookout to see if it's the dog nose next time as well. The next one is entitled People Story. 6 weeks ago my wife, 36, and I, 38, moved across the country with our son, 5, to live in my late grandma's old house that we inherited. We're from Seattle and moved to a town in Texas, and honestly my wife and I ducking hate living here, but it's financially better for us for the time being, plus honestly I'm attached to my grandma's house. I have a lot of tattoos, long hair, just a general look that really isn't common here but was totally normal in Seattle. I've gotten a lot of looks and some crap from people here, which I don't really give a duck about, but suffice it to say my appearance doesn't fit in. So far my wife had been the one picking our son up and dropping him off at school/daycare because my work schedule was all ducked up. But I've settled into the same hours she works, so now we're picking our son up and dropping him off together. I met our son's teacher, Tittle, late 20s, earlier today, and I could just tell she was uncomfortable with my appearance from the jump. My wife and I talked to her for a bit about how our son was adjusting to the new school. After talking about that for a bit, his teacher asked me to cover up my tattoos, which would basically require covering up all of my skin below the neck when I come pick him up and drop him off because it was off-putting and apparently tattoos are against the school dress code. I said no. I was clothed, tank top and shorts, and I'm not a student, so I said I wasn't under their dress code. Besides, none of my tattoos that are visible when I'm clothed to any degree can be considered offensive unless you find the very idea of tattoos offensive. She insisted, which irritated me and my wife, and basically we just told her that I wasn't going to change how I dress and wasn't going to stop picking up my kid, so she and anyone else who had a problem would have to just deal with it. My wife and I think this is totally ducking ridiculous, but my mom, whom I called earlier today, said I should just go with it and that I'm being a pain in the ass. Edit, my wife and I have decided to call the principal of the school on Monday and set up a meeting to see if this policy even actually exists, or if you guys are right and it's just the teacher either making crap up or applying teacher/student/parent volunteer rules. We'll keep an eye on how our son is treated by the teacher and his classmates too. Update, my wife and I called the front office of our son's school this morning and were able to actually meet with the principal and one of the vice principals right before school let out. So we got to leave work and pick our son up early too, which was really nice. Turns out those of you who said this was probably the teacher overstepping and not an actual rule were totally right. Apparently it is against dress code for both the students and teachers to have tattoos, temporary or otherwise, but as long as you're decent, a parent can show up dressed as they like. The meeting went about as well as it could have gone. The principal was pretty avoidant of saying the teacher did anything wrong, per se, and did try to pass it off as the result of his teacher's inexperience, but she did say that the teacher's actions weren't right, so I guess that's something. My wife and I also asked if we could move our son to the other class if he seems unhappy for any reason or if we think the teacher is treating him unfairly, and the principal agreed, so that's also good. I also just wanted to address some of the things that came up multiple times in comments on the original post Bonon. Like I said a couple times in the comments, we live in a fairly small town. My wife and I actually work in a different, and somewhat bigger, town than the one we live in, so I didn't give my exact location, plus I'm not really familiar with the regions of Texas. Basically, I'm pretty sure Dallas is the closest big city to us, but even Dallas isn't exactly close. I can't speak to how popular my look is in the cities, except Houston. My wife lived there for a year as a teenager and said tattoos were fairly common, but it's definitely not common here. I've seen a couple guys with like 1 or 2 tattoos, but none in color, like mine, and none with nearly as many as I have, and none actually in the town we live in, either. Not totally relevant, but they've all got full beards too, and I like to keep my face clean shaven. Too. Like I said in my original post, we moved here for a mix of financial and sentimental reasons. Basically, even before we got here, the plan was to not stay for any longer than 3 years, but honestly, we might be moving before the end of this one because my wife and I really despise it here and our son seems so let down every weekend. I didn't really want to get into it, but I had to get surgery to treat my IBD about 1.5 years ago, which obviously was costly. Plus we wanted to save a good amount of money for our son while he's young so he won't need as much in student loans if he eventually goes to college, and we basically weren't able to afford to live the way we wanted in Seattle anymore. On top of that, to be honest, I am very attached to my grandma's house and I just wasn't able to part with it immediately when she died. My wife and my grandma are the only people I've really felt at home with, if that makes any sense. And my grandma's death was unexpected, so I really wasn't prepared to just get rid of her house. My wife, the absolute ducking angel that she is, suggested that we move here for a little while, just until we know where to settle until our son leaves for college. Maybe we'll get enough when we sell the house that it can be Seattle, maybe we won't. My wife and son mean more to me than anything and everyone else in the world combined, so I don't want them to live in a place they hate. Some of you think that I shouldn't have said anything and should have just complied for fear of my son being treated poorly, but I think that's a super crappy precedent to set and model for our son, and I think it probably wouldn't affect anyone's behavior anyway. Obviously, whether people accept my tats or not doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, but I don't want my son to think that it is okay for other people to tell him to look a certain way because that's what they want/are comfortable with, nor do I want him to think it's okay to treat others that way. I don't think teaching him to conform is ever a good thing. I also don't think trying to conform actually makes people accept you anymore, but that's just me. Plus he's 5 and he's already brought cupcakes to school, so I should hope the other 5-year-olds aren't going to have a problem for. I thought I was clear in the original post that all of my tattoos that are visible when I'm clothed are not offensive, but apparently I wasn't. I'm not going to show them, obviously, but basically most of the visible ones are of animals, extant and extinct, with some book and movie references too. Even the evolution tattoo I have is mostly not visible with a tank on. I do have some gory and some X-rated tattoos that would be inappropriate for kids to see, but those are all not visible when I'm clothed. I'd need to be in nothing but a Speedo, or super short shorts, which I don't wear, for even some of them to be visible, and I'd need to be naked for all of them to be visible. So suffice it to say there wasn't anything visible that a reasonable person would find offensive. 5. A lot of you have weird opinions about whether men should wear tank tops at all or not. I think that's just a weird thing to comment on, honestly. I mean, who cares? I'm not going to comment on whether men should hold their big belt buckle in public or not. I wasn't wearing a wife beater either. It was a tank top. As long as it feels like summer to me, I'm gonna wear one. Plus my wife really loves them, so I'm definitely not going to just excise them from my wardrobe. The meeting with our son's teacher was impromptu anyway. If it had been an actual parent-teacher conference, sure, I probably would have gone with a t-shirt, but we just thought it'd be a quick get out, pick up our son, and go occasion. The next one is entitled People Story. So, my boyfriend apparently watches a lot of Game of Thrones because my brother and I are apparently Cersei and Jaime Lannister. I see my brother once or twice per month. When we see each other, we may have lunch, catch a movie, take a walk, or just kick back at his or my apartment and watch movies, play video games, or just have some beer and catch up. I see my boyfriend 3 to 4 times per week at least. On a good month we see each other probably more than 20-30 days. We have been together for 14 months. My boyfriend has met my brother several times. At first I thought they were cool, and my brother honestly got that vibe as well. Beyond hanging out a few times initially, my boyfriend never really hung out with my brother when he was in town, despite me asking as well as my brother inviting him along. However, recently he brought it up to me that he was not comfortable with us hanging out so much alone, and it made him feel weird. He has asked me to not be alone with my brother when we do hang out, and if that's not possible and it will be just us, then he doesn't like that idea. Again, I reiterate, my boyfriend clearly watches too much Game of Thrones because he seems to have some assumption there is some sort of weird incest going on or something. My brother and I have always been close and had each other's backs, that's it. We live our own lives, but we love each other and make an effort to maintain a good relationship, especially as our own lives begin to move off in separate directions, despite only living a few hours apart. I have no idea what it is/why he would want me to do this. He has not given a reason beyond "I don't feel comfortable with you hanging out with that guy." There is a photo on Instagram of the two of us on a hike along with my brother's friend. I damaged my ankle a couple months back on that hike, and my brother carried me on his back for the rest of the way. His friend took photos because it simply looked funny, but my BF pretty much dislikes those and says it's really weird that you all are 20-something and are so close. For duck's sake, he is my brother and I was injured. Yes, I am angry at my boyfriend. 1. Because he's asked me to stop hanging out alone with my brother, and 2. I do not appreciate the incestuous implications. Reddit, what do you think of this situation, and what do you think I should do? Update. So this past Friday I had a talk with my SO about his feelings regarding my relationship with my twin. At first it was the same, I just feel uncomfortable, etc. But after pushing for a very frustrating 2 hours, he ends up talking about how in the home he grew up, it was very reserved. Affection was sparing / the equivalent of getting a present for doing well on exams, etc. It was used as a reward. He admits that as a result he sees siblings who are close, especially as close as my brother and I, as being inappropriate, and it makes him uncomfortable. He says he's sorry for this and he'll try to change. Anyway, fast forward to Saturday evening. My brother and a few of our old friends are in the area, so they invite me, my SO, and a couple of our friends out. We end up hitting this Latin bar / restaurant with about 3 couples, 2 single girls and 3 single guys. My brother and I and another 2, one of the single guys and one of the single gals who we met Latin dancing a few years back, decide we'll dance since there's music playing and a few other people dancing. It's no professional Dancing with the Stars kind of stuff, by the way. These are all people who've been drinking and just having a merry time, and those who aren't dancing are watching and having fun as well. So my brother and I dance for a bit. We stumble here and there due to some liquor a couple times. It looks sexy is the word, I suppose, but nothing inappropriate. If any one of you has done Latin dancing, you know there's just something sensual and free about those dances in general, whether you're with a partner or just doing a little something by yourself, though generally you're with a partner. Anyway, I dance with a few people including my other female friends and their boyfriends who don't really know how, but we all have a blast with me trying and failing to teach their drunk asses how to cha-cha and salsa. I also pulled my boyfriend for a dance, but he remained planted by the bar area, drinking and generally being stony-faced. We get back to his place. I'm in the mood to fool around. He is angry and starts yelling about how we talked yesterday and he thought this ducking crap, exact words, was over. He is quite pissed and starts ranting about if you want to duck your brother so bad, go ahead, and is basically telling me that he knows I love my brother and I always ducking put that a hole, exact words, first, and that he would never do something like that with his sister in front of me or other people. Dancing. At a point he shoved me away from him really hard when I tried to put my hands on him and calm him down. I got ducking pissed off. I go to leave. He grabs me and is yelling. At a point I start crying and he seems to snap out of it and gets this shocked look and starts saying I'm sorry and trying to hug me, etc., etc. He's apologizing profusely, but now I storm out. Naturally I go back to my place and I call, yes, my twin brother as well as one of my friends, a girl, and the three of us proceed to get drunk together. Woke up on my bed next to my friend and my brother snoozing on my couch on Sunday. Boyfriend came over to try and explain/apologize. I told him I didn't want to see him. He pushes into my apartment. Brother gets in his face and tells him to duck off and not to come near me again, while his other friend who came over along with his girlfriend. At this point it's me, my best female friend, my brother, brother's friend, brother's friend's girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, and that the only reason he's not getting his ass beat is because I asked them not to do so. I tell him it's done and not to contact me/come near me anymore. Also, part of me has to admit I danced with my brother simply to get a rise out of my boyfriend due to how much crap he'd been giving me over it. Did not know he would lose it like that. It is what it is. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.